Good evening.
Hi, Penny. How are you?
Sorry, you're looking at the ceiling. The camera on my computer is particularly bad. Maybe it looks all right to you, but it doesn't look all right to me.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance. I had a car behind me when I saw you, but I would have stopped longer because that actually, I told Ray about it in an email, but that's our new car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the other one I had gave up the ghost, so I bought so I got a plug-in hybrid.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't notice what kind of car it was. So what kind of plug-in
Well, it's an
hybrid?
Ionic. It's the same as what Mary has.
Oh, so you have a blue one and a black one.
Yeah, blue one and a black one, and this one is a plug-in.
Okay.
So the range, I mean, since it's a hybrid, the range on just the battery is a lot less.
Yeah.
It's about 29 miles.
Okay, good.
But I can plug it in at night and it's ready to go in the morning. And
Wow.
yeah, I got actually I got 1,100 miles off my first tank of gas.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because actually it does all this stuff, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it'll say like, what your gas mileage is on different days. On the days I only use the electric motor, it says I'm getting 999 miles to the gallon.
Yeah. When we first fill up even the Prius, it gives you that crazy numbers.
Yeah.
Till it settles down.
Yeah, I'll bring. Yeah, I know. Charles. Actually, Tom. I was at the church today. Tom. What's his name? Jane's husband, Jane.
Nolan.
Tom Nolan got a plug-in Prius. He got a plug-in hybrid Prius.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah, but we kind of stick with MJ Sullivan.
Well, I'll tell you, with all the traffic, and it was crazy in LA, I don't know how anybody stands it. It's horrible. But you could count the electric cars on two hands in a couple of blocks. I said, well, it wasn't quite that much, but there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that everybody's sitting in electric vehicles going 10 miles an hour on 8-lane highways, because that's what it is.
Well, that's actually the best way to do that, because when you're traveling that slowly, and if you're in stop and go traffic, you're actually charging the battery.
Yes, that's what Deanna says. She charges the battery up entirely on the Prius even, because she always calls me, and I said, don't call me while you're driving. She says, Mom, I'm going 15. Okay, I guess you can talk on the phone then.
Does he have a hands-free?
Hello, Mike. Hi, Mitch. I can hear you,
Hi,
Mitch.
David. How are you?
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Oh, I can see you.
Huh. Maybe I have to disconnect and reconnect.
Look at the way the camera is. This is crazy.
Yeah, sometime when I get a chance, I'll next time I go to the book barn, I'll stop by.
Well, it's so dark you can't see it.
You know what? I'm gonna.
Looks like Nancy's still trying to connect. Nice beard, Ray.
Well, here, I'll hit launch. See, I launched meeting, but okay.
Can you see everybody else, David?
There now. I just came up. Whatever you did.
Didn't do anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can see.
I'll do it again.
Yeah. So this new car. I heard you were talking about a new car when I got in. Does this new car have a sail option? You can put up a sail and go with downwind.
That's a thought. But hi, Helen.
Hi.
Let me open that.
I heard you guys got quite a sales pitch this morning.
Well,
They're looking at refurbishing the kitchen at St. Mark Lutheran Church
oh,
to support the community luncheons they do.
We'll see how the kitchen will really change. Of course, getting the monies together, that will tell the story.
Yeah. Let's see, here's Dale. Actually, Helen has seen our new car, right, Helen?
I don't know which one is the new car.
Well, actually, the black one is the newest one.
Oh, the one that's always plugged into the side of the building.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know,
what is
the
it?
next time they send me a thing about renewing or being, doing the finances to recalculate our rent, they always have at the very end that suggestion line, and I'm going to put in, how about thinking in the future and putting in plugs for electric cars?
Yeah, that's
The reality.
yeah. I mean, Tom Tolp, he's the president of St. Mark. I mean, he's talking about it.
Ask Tesla. Ask Tesla to put them in.
Yeah.
Ask Tesla.
Yeah,
to put 'em
I'll
in.
get right on that. I've got, me and Elon Musk are like this.
Yeah,
Yeah, the trouble is Tesla plugs don't work in other cars.
yeah. And then plus they'll be parking there all night,
Mm.
They do it. What kind of car did you get?
It's a Hyundai Ioniq.
Okay, so it's hybrid or?
Mine is a hybrid plug-in. Mary has an all-electric that she's had since February.
A Hyundai?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, they look the same, except mine's black, hers is blue.
Hey, together you're a bruise.
That's cool. So when does the gas kick in at about 25 miles an hour?
No, well, on mine, it doesn't kick in until the battery gets down to about 17% or so.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you can go highway speed with the battery.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can go back and forth to St. Mark without using the gasoline.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a full tank of gas when I bought it, and it lasted 1,100 miles.
Yeah, you heard
Wow.
say that before. I was trying to plug it. Yeah. That's great stuff.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi
How are you?
there.
Hey,
Hi.
hey.
Hi.
Hi, Carol.
Hello there. And
Hi.
hi,
Diane.
Diane.
Hi.
Are we all here?
I think we might be. Janet is got a meeting, and she may try to join us later, so I'll keep an eye out for her. And it's Donita's daughter is in the hospital,
Oh,
Oh,
so please keep them in their prayers. I don't know what the matter is. So we'll get started here. So tonight we're going to take a leap forward in time. And so what we'll be talking and what we'll be hearing is a lecture that Shaye Cohen gave it to it was the American Jewish Council and the Greek Orthodox Metropolitanism in Boston. And so it was a joint presentation on Hanukkah and so on. It's a it's a YouTube video, so the quality is not as good as the videos that we've been doing, but he comes through the voice is pretty clear, so it should be okay. So what we're talking about is the stories are from the Apocrypha. Now the Apocrypha are a set of books which they came out of what was called the Septuagint, which was a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, or Greek version that was done. The books have varied canonical status within different traditions. For instance, in the Hebrew tradition, they are not recognized at all as scripture. That doesn't mean they're regarded as bad books or you can't read them. It's just they're not regarded as scripture. And if we look back at page 4, I mean, you don't have to look now, but if you look back at when you had the table of the different books and the different versions of the Bible, so the books we're talking about today are 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Within the Roman Catholic tradition, they are actually regarded as canonical. So if you were to buy a Catholic edition of the Bible, they would be in there. They're considered part of the histories, along with Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and so on. And then in the Greek Orthodox tradition, they're also in their canon. If you get a Protestant Bible, it varies. If you get a sort of a big study Bible, then you would probably find it in the middle and labeled Apocrypha. It kind of depends on how much money you want to spend. So it varies on the Bible that you find them in. But typically, if they were, if you do get them, they're in the middle and identified as such. So the period we're talking about is really the sort of the second and first century BCE. So this is still before the birth of Christ, but it is considered what's technically it's called the Inter-Testamental Period, because it's between the last book, the writing of the last book of the Old Testament, and the gospel and the creation of the New Testament. So this is a period. Now this is also, and it's important to remember, this was the Hellenistic period, which meant that the Greeks, and Professor Cohen will go into this, but the Greeks were the dominant power in the region, and because Alexander the Great and all that. So Greek was the common language. Greek lifestyle, Greek culture was the dominant culture. One of the issues, actually, and it's something important to keep in mind as we go through the course, is really to what extent did the Israelites, the Jews, want to conform with Greek culture? That's really sort of the underlying debate here. Is, how Greek did they want to be, and how much did they want to retain their own identity? And that's a recurring theme, I think, in a lot of these stories. So let's see. So one of the now these books have never been found written in Hebrew. They've been found existing in Greek. It's conceivable they were never written in Hebrew, because by the time of this time, first, second century, Hebrew was actually a declining language. Most people spoke Greek. And so many Israelites, many Jews did not speak Hebrew. So it's conceivable that these books were never translated, never written in Hebrew to begin with. But with as much with any scripture, there's always a lot of uncertainty. So,
Mitch, could I ask a question?
Sure.
What was the role, if any, of the Roman occupation at this time? Were they?
None. No, Rome didn't come on the scene until about, I'm doing this from memory, it's about 60-ish BCE. And actually, ironically, it came on the scene initially because you're going to hear about the Maccabees, and the fact that they defeated the Greeks one of the few times that the Jews rebelled and won. And then there were, as with all things, after a while there were divisions, and so the Maccabees actually invited the Romans in and became clients of the Romans. And then after a while, the Romans just said, "I'm tired of your squabbling," and they came in and took over.
Oh, and that was, you said, about halfway through the first century BCE?
Yeah, roughly. So the period we're talking about, the Romans were not on the scene. So
Yeah, I don't know.
So does anybody have any other questions? Okay, I did send out, so next week we will be starting with Exodus. I did send out a section of the Klugel book if you want to look at that. That gives you some background. And you'll even get to watch a piece of the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, which is the tight one.
Is he carrying a gun?
No, a staff.
No,
He did more with the staff than he ever did with a gun.
Yeah. He was president of the NRA.
I have to say, my father took the whole family all the way to New Haven to see that on some kind of big screen thing, because he thought it was going to be the best movie ever. And I was very young at the time, and I said, okay, this has got to be a great movie. I thought it was an okay movie. I think it was maybe I don't remember what year it came out, but I was very young.
Early 60s.
Yeah, 60s.
Yeah, you had to be.
Late 50s or 60s.
Yeah, I was. You're much more advanced than I am. I was watching the 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah.
Father's doing, wasn't.
Sure.
he wanted all of us to see it and see it on some big screen. I don't
Well,
move all the way to New Haven for it.
it's actually something to keep in mind as we discuss scripture, is the way people's perception of the canon changes. I have taught the Exodus thing more than once, and more than once people have said that what they know about Exodus is what they got from it's on the Ten Commandments.
Whoa.
So, and that's scripture as it comes to us. A lot of times it's filtered, even not just translation, but it comes to us filtered through various other means. And sometimes those other means get sort of, if you will, semi-canonized.
Well, Cecil B. DeMille wasn't part of the clergy.
Yeah. So anyways, without further ado, I will attempt to do this. Again, if there's any difficulties, I've got my cell phone here, so you can either text me or send me a message in chat if you're having a hard time. So first thing, I'm gonna mute y'all. By the way, I think Hanukkah just wrapped up last night. There. And we share the screen. Share the sign. We're coming in right after his introduction. There was about 14 minutes worth of various introductions, and I thought we really didn't need to deal with those.
I'm not, of course, heaven forbid, referring to anybody in this room or to their immediate ancestors. I am, of course, referring to the Greeks of old, sometimes called pagans, sometimes called Hellenes. They go by different names, but our sources often call them Greeks. So if I do that, please understand I'm not referring to contemporary Greeks. Sorry, not necessarily referring to contemporary Greeks. Okay, let's briefly talk about the events that brought about the festival of Hanukkah. As you know from your high school history, in 323 BC, 333, 334 BCE, Alexander the Great began his conquest from mainland Greece, technically from Macedonia, into Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, and then from there into Syria, into the land of Israel, into Egypt, and then back up, sneaking through then into the lands of Asia. The great conquest of Alexander the Great. From this point onward, Judea, like everything else for miles around, was a province, a colony, a territory, right, run by part of large Hellenistic empires. Large Hellenistic empires. We call them Hellenistic because they're fundamentally Hellenic in character. Their language is Greek. People are speaking Greek. The government is all speaking Greek. The officials are ethnically Greek or Macedonian. Their language and culture are Greek. But of course, the peoples of these large, vast areas still maintain their own ethnicity, their own languages, and their own ways of life. So everything goes along, bubbles along quietly for a couple of centuries. We don't hear much going on except for wars, incessant wars and battles between the rival Greek, Hellenistic generals, each of whom, of course, is trying to increase the size of their empire at the expense of their neighbors. And these battles go on, and Judea is located strategically between Egypt to the south and Syria to the north, and is consequently a field of battle between the Syrians in the north who are trying to conquer it on the way to Egypt, and the Egyptians in the south who are trying to push back into Syria. So throughout the 3rd century BCE, the 200s, there are an incessant series of wars, until finally, in the year 200 or so BCE, Judea is captured for the final last time by the Hellenistic kings of Syria, right, known as the Seleucids. Now, sometimes you see in textbooks they're called Syrian, but trust me on this, the Seleucids are as Syrian as I am, right? They don't have an ounce of Syrian blood in them. They speak Greek. The language is Greek, and the Macedonian imperialist class, of course, only married each other. They wouldn't, heaven forbid, marry the natives. So this is good old-fashioned imperialism, good old-fashioned colonialism. Judea is part now of the Seleucid Empire, the empire headquartered in Syria and points east. Everything continues along quietly. We don't hear about any problems. There are no rebellions, no revolts, no persecutions, no nothing, just as there hadn't been for centuries. Until something dramatic begins to happen in the 170s BC. One can see turmoil and unrest. And in the 160s, boom, we have an explosion. And the events happen rapidly one after the other, and modern scholars to this day still trying to figure out who pushed whom first, who did what to whom first, how to disentangle this series of very complicated events. The chronology is very, very uncertain, and the causality is uncertain. I do not understand why events transpired the way they did. But the important thing is the big picture is, stepping back for a moment, we have going on in the 160s BC, the Judeans versus the Hellenistic kings' armies of Syria. We have, on the one hand, a religious persecution. The religious persecution takes place both in the Temple of Jerusalem and in the countryside. In the Temple of Jerusalem, our texts tell us the temple is profaned, quote unquote, is polluted, quote unquote. Some obscene cult object is brought into the Temple of Jerusalem and put right on or next to the very altar. If you go to Hebrew school, they told you it was a statue. Not clear it was a statue. The reference to a statue in the sanctuary appears the first time in Jerome, who lived centuries after the event. So some obscene cult object, called the Abomination of Desolation in the book of Daniel, right, was established in the temple, right smack dab in the middle of the temple, and we are told the rites of the temple were profaned, were sacrilege took place in the temple. Outside the temple in the countryside, there is some kind of organized effort by the king to see to it that the Jews do bow down to statues, eat forbidden foods, violate the Sabbath, don't circumcise their children, and so on. This has sometimes been said to be the first ever war in the history of the world that arose in response to a religious persecution. We don't understand what on earth Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek king of Syria, was thinking. What did he hope to accomplish by doing this? And what on earth? Well, just explain it. The events such as these are unparalleled in the ancient world. In the ancient pre-Christian world, events such as these are unparalleled. So, how did the Jews react to this extraordinary series of events? Attacking an attack both on the temple, its priesthood, its cult, its worship, and also religiosity out in the world, out in the country. Well, our texts show us there are several different responses by the various groups in Judea. On the one extreme we have who we might call collaborationists, Jews who were going along with the king. Whatever the king says is the law. So we go along with the king. In fact, some modern scholars have even argued, amazingly enough, that the brains behind this persecution were the Jews themselves, or at least some group within the Jews, who were trying very hard to compel their brethren to become modern. Hey, it's the 2nd century BCE, it's time to get modern, loosen up. Right? Time to abandon some of our old-fashioned ways, which don't work anymore in the 2nd century BCE. Our youth is alienated, etc., that sort of way. So it has been suggested. So there was a group of Jews in Judea who were collaborationists, who were working together with the king, apparently. We don't understand exactly how far they would have gone. You mean they were working with the king to profane the temple? It doesn't make too much sense. Well, so the mysteries abound. But there clearly were groups of Jews who were allied with the temple, with the king, and the king's officials. At the other extreme, you have Jews who are prepared to die for the law. And some of them actually did die for the law. This This is the first time in Jewish history we hear about martyrs. In fact, one could argue the first time in human history we hear about martyrs. Depends upon how you define exactly what a martyr is. So we have the famous set of stories. I'm sorry. In some circles they're very famous, but alas, those circles are not very big. The famous set of stories in the second book of Maccabees, chapter 6 and 7. We have the wonderful story of Elazar, the aged priest, and an even more wonderful story of the woman and her 7 sons. Right? All of whom consciously, deliberately, unafraid, look at death and say, I choose death rather than violate the law. To you, it's a trivial thing to eat this bowl of forbidden meat, but for me, it's not trivial. I refuse, even though I know death will ensue. So we see Jews such as these, who are resisting unto death in the face of these extraordinary challenges. We have other kinds of Jews who are resisting differently, and I want to make that clear. Martyrdom is a kind of resistance. Martyrdom is a way of fighting. It's not passive. It's not quietistic. It's active. The martyr is fighting back against the persecutor. There are other Jews, though, who thought that fighting back by getting killed is not an efficient mode of resistance. Right? They thought the way to fight back is to run off into the wilderness and to form guerrilla bands and, fight. Stones, arrows, spears, fight. And of course, the most famous of these bands, and apparently were several, again, our sources are not very clear, but one band emerges as the dominant, as the leader of this resistance activity, and that, of course, is our hero, Judah the Maccabee. Judah the Maccabee, right, one of 5 sturdy, burly sons, produced by one Mattathias, right? They begin in the countryside, not in the city, not in Jerusalem, out in the countryside, in Modin. They apparently are a local family. They're not part of the Jerusalem establishment. This group, this clan, emerges as the leaders of those who are going to fight for the law. And they begin as guerrilla fighters, and amazingly enough, they are successful. It is they who lead the fight, win small skirmishes, larger skirmishes, win some battles, and amazingly enough, triumph. And the climax of this part of the story is the Hasmanians entering the temple of Jerusalem, re-purifying it, re-establishing the old order of worship, restoring the old calendar and the old festival cycle, etc., the laws of purity, and putting the true priests back on the job, and restoring the temple just the way it was. And the holiday we have to celebrate this great Maccabean victory is, class, Hanukkah. Right. On the 25th day, yeah, I know, it's odd coincidence. Yeah, the 25th day in the month of the winter solstice. Yeah, it's a big coincidence. Yeah, and you celebrate by lighting lamps and fire. Yeah, I know. But that's maybe some other time. We can talk about that. So that's the festival of Hanukkah, the 25th day of Kislev, in which we celebrate the great victory of the Maccabees, Judah the Maccabee and his party, in reconquering, repurifying the temple. There's one more response I can mention too, which I should have mentioned earlier, but I wasn't looking at my notes, which is that there were other Jews who responded by basically dreaming. Here's a time of crisis. What should we do? The answer is, I don't know what to do, but I think this is the end, capital E. This is the end of the world. Surely the temples, the heavens will open up and fiery chariots will come down, and this will be the end of history. Events so catastrophic, so cataclysmic, surely deserve an unusual kind of response, so they betoken something. We know about such Jews from the book of Daniel. It's found in the Hebrew Bible. The book of Daniel was written, composed, edited, compiled, I'm not sure exactly what word to use, during these events of the 160s BCE. And as far as the author of Daniel is concerned, these events mark the end of history. He describes these events very precisely until right near the end of the book, when he is convinced that this is it. The heavens will open up, the dead will be resurrected, there'll be some cataclysm. He was wrong, it turns out. We're still here, right? But one assumes there are other Jews who felt the same way. What did the Hasmanians do after the great victory? I use Hasmanians and Maccabees indistinguishably. If you want to know the difference, ask me later. So what did the Hasmanians and Maccabees do after their great victory? Well, you would have thought that they would lay down their arms and stop. After all, they went to fight for the law. They went to fight to put an end to the persecution. They went to fight to restore the temple, to regain the temple, to put the priesthood and the purity rules back into effect. You would have thought after Hanukkah, 164 BCE, 25th day of Kislev, 164 BCE, they had won. They had gotten everything they were set out to achieve. You would have thought, now it's time to go home, go back to the farm. But now some other mysterious something goes on, which we don't fully understand. They kept fighting. What will ultimately emerge over the next 30 years, not from Judah himself, alas, who gets killed in battle in 161 BCE, but further down, what will emerge is a new state, an independent state, with the Maccabees themselves in charge. Not Judah himself, but his brother, and then ultimately his brother's sons. The line continues from Judah's nephews. So, from this guerrilla band fighting for the law, to restore the temple and freedom of worship, we wind up with a Maccabean state, which then has its own ups and downs, rise and falls. She's a very quick arc. She's a height around the year 100 or so BCE. It's at its utmost. And 63 BCE, it's all over when the Romans come to town. That's the brief trajectory, brief arc of the events of Hanukkah. One very interesting thing about Hanukkah is, aside from the events themselves, which are quite fascinating, is what it means, or the different meanings that people see in Hanukkah, or what meanings we extract from this story. What does the story of Hanukkah mean? And here I'll just treat briefly three responses, and then more later if you like. One response would be a kind of Zionist reading, or the reading that you would get in Israeli public schools. Right, what is that? Hasmanians throw off our foreign yoke, foreign oppressor, right? Here we are in our homeland, in our national homeland, right? And the Jews, of course, do not tolerate foreign rule in their own homeland. So we throw off foreign yoke, and the Hasmanians go on to fame, fortune, and victory. And the first thing they do is to establish an independent state. I would call that an Israeli nationalist reading of the story, where the story is understood in nationalist terms, and the great victory of the Hasmanians is precisely a great victory for Jewish nationalism. Have our own state and our own homeland. And of course, there is something on which to rely in this reading of the story, because the Hasmanians did establish a state. What that leaves out, of course, given that leaves out from what all of our texts emphasize, is of course the divine or the miraculous element. All of our sources, both 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees, 2 books that are found in the Apocrypha. Hold that thought for a second. Footnote, class, the books in the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha means these are not found in our Hebrew Bible. So don't go home and take out your Jewish study Bible. You will not find the books in the Apocrypha. And the Jewish Bible does not have apocryphal books. The Christian Bible has apocryphal books. Again, it depends which Christian Bible you're talking about. But in any case, these are part of the Christian Bible. The key thing to remember is the books of the Apocrypha are, all of them, Jewish books. All of them are written by Jews in antiquity, some in Hebrew, some in Greek, right? But they're all written by Jewish authors, even though we, Jews, lost the apocryphal books when we went over to only biblical books in Hebrew, thank you. We don't want anything else. We lost the apocryphal books and relied upon Christians to preserve them, which they did. And now we Jews can read them still, thanks to our Christian brethren who preserved them for us. But they are Jewish books, so therefore they are kosher to read. Have no fear. Okay. Back to where I was. Back to where I was in the text. So 1 Maccabee, 2 Maccabees. These are our main sources for these events. And then a sort of other sources. They all emphasize the miraculous, theological aspect of the story. Right? It was God who brought about these dramatic, catastrophic events. And it was God who ultimately led Judah and or his successors to great victory. So one thing left out in the Israeli national narrative is precisely this divine element. The element that God is directing these events in his own inscrutable way. So another version, I would say, would be opposite to that, which is the one that emphasizes the miraculous above all others and suppresses everything else. And that's the version that you might have heard in Hebrew school. Right? The version which says that, why do we celebrate Hanukkah? Well, it's because when the Hasmanians defeated the Greeks, the bad Greeks, when the Hazmatians defeated the Greeks and reclaimed the temple, that's all by way of introduction. Now comes the real story. So they only found 1 cruse of oil, and it was impure. All the oils were made impure by the Greeks. They couldn't use them to relight the lamps and and it takes a week to send to Amazon to get pure oil, and time to buy. It's a whole week goes by. So what are you going to do? So they thought they were in a pickle. So they lit the lamp with the 1 cruse of oil that they had left. Right, thinking it would last for 1 day, and miraculously it lasted 8 days. And that's why we have a full Hanukkah for 8 days. Now, it's a wonderful little story. I'm not sure it's the best way to teach Hanukkah to children, but okay. The point of the story, surely though, is to say Hanukkah is about a miracle, period. The great victory of the Hasmanians is only by way of prologue. By way of introduction. It sort of sets up the story. But the story itself has nothing to do with the Hasmanians. The story itself has to do with a cruse of oil, which of course is entirely in divine hands. In that version, there's no nationalism, there's no state, there's barely any conflict at all. What you're left with is a miracle story, pure and simple. That's what Hanukkah is about, and that reading of the story. Now, of course, that reading of the story leaves out all those other things, which are also part of the story. So then I'd like to tell you now my last and my concluding point, which is, you're ready for it now, class, the true meaning of Hanukkah. You're supposed to laugh at that, all right. I would say, what do we modern American Jews get out of the story? I would argue that the lesson for us modern American Jews get out of the story is that the Maccabees learned how to negotiate the challenge of living in the world with Greeks, or we would say perhaps Gentiles. Which the power on the block is the Seleucid Empire, and we Jews have to negotiate living with the Seleucid Empire, with the Greeks. But negotiate doesn't mean we're going to surrender everything. On the contrary, the Maccabees show there's a point that comes we have to draw the line when you say, no, we can't do it. Right? Certain aspects of our identity are too essential to compromise. When it comes to the temple and its worship, no compromise. You can't mess around with my temple. When it comes to our ritual observances, we can't compromise. We have circumcision, Sabbath, food laws. Those are essential. We can't compromise. But once you get past that, as long as the essential is preserved, and what that essential is, I leave for you to fill in the blanks, but as long as one preserves that which is essential, then the Hasmanians say, of course we can be Hellenized as much as anybody. We like Greek culture. We just need to make sure we can control it. So the classic example of that, with this I conclude, the classic example of that is the Hasmanian Proclamation of Festival of Hanukkah. So where does Hanukkah come from? It's an annual festival celebrating the great victory over the Greeks. And where does Hanukkah come from? The story is told with both 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees. The Hazmanians and their party, right, proclaim a festival. And they establish a festival for 8 days annually to celebrate the great victory over the Greeks. So class, where did the Hasmanians get this crazy idea that we, the Jewish people, have the political power, authority, to establish a festival by fiat?
The Greek idea.
Greek idea. You don't get it from the Bible. The festivals in the Bible don't come that way. Moses gives the Israelites a calendar. King David did not establish a festival for conquering the city of Jerusalem. Joshua did not establish a festival for conquering the land of Canaan. We don't get festivals that way. But somehow the Maccabees have this amazing idea that we, Jewish people in conclave assembled, we can decide we want the festival. Not only that, but the festival we decide we want is going to be an annual festival to commemorate a great victory. We have no other festival like that. But no, except for Purim and Esther. Well, that's me later. Back to later. Right? We don't have that, those festivals of that kind. And the reason is that the political idea that the people have the power to establish a festival, and in turn we want a festival to commemorate a great victory, just as the Greeks did every year after the great battle over the Persians, with that annual festival of Delphi every year among the Greeks to celebrate the great victory over the Persians. Well, that idea comes to the Maccabees from the Greeks. And that's perfectly fine. That doesn't threaten Judaism, that enriches it. And with that, I will stop. Thank you.
Okay, so let's see if I can unmute people now. There. So did anybody hear anything they had never heard before?
Yeah, I'd never really heard the origins of it at all, ever.
Likewise. Did the Maccabees then found the Jewish state at that point when they broke away from the Greeks?
Well, they established a state. Now there had been a Jewish Israelite nation. I mean, arguably, this was actually the United Monarchy started with David in about 1000 BCE, they estimate.
Uh-huh.
So they were, in their minds, probably reestablishing, reclaiming that existence. But it was a much different state than what David had.
Right.
I think one of the points Cohen makes is the fact that they maintained their rituals and maintained their identity, the essential, what they regarded as the essential parts of the identity as
Right.
Jews, but then they adapted many aspects of Greek life. I think that was his point, that, what things could they compromise, what things would they regard as essential in terms of their identity.
Right. As only being Jewish.
What's interesting, and we'll get to this in a few months when we talk about Daniel, but Daniel comes out of this same period. And that ended up in the canon, and Maccabees sort of didn't. So I did, if you look at, you don't have to, but in First Maccabees, the actual directive here is where they talk about early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Chislev.
Yeah.
They rose and offered sacrifice as the water acts on the altar of burnt offerings that they had built. At that very season and that very day, the Gentiles had profaned it. So they were doing this 3 years after the Greeks had profaned it. It was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshiped and blessed heaven, who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days. So now, as far as the miracle of the oil, that actually comes out of the Talmud, which is another set of stories, books, oral Torah, it's called. So that comes in later, where they have the thing about the crucible oil. A cruise, it's CRUZE, which is like a container. And you're supposed to have only special blessed, sacred oil. And they only had one cruise, and that was supposedly going to last them 1 day, but they had 8. So
I have a question.
No.
When did the 25th get to be a special day? Was that Greek? Was that Roman? Why the 25th? And I understand it being near the solstice. So you have that reason for it. But the solstice is like the 21st or the 22nd, right? So why who started thinking the 25th was the day to do something?
that would be the Jews, the Maccabees.
I thought, oh, okay. So we choose the 25th as our special day because we're copying that.
There's other reasons. I've heard that there was a Roman, I think it was Saturnalia or something. There was also the winter solstice. I mean, there were some concurrent holidays
That's what I was asking. When did those holidays start being holidays?
That was the Romans. That the Christmas celebration, I believe. Well, the early Italian Christians.
Yeah, they had Festival of Lights, is what I've heard in the past.
And they took over the Roman. You're right, Mitch, what you mentioned. It was a Bacchanalian wine something, and the Christians made it Christmas.
Yeah, but why did Hanukkah get on it also?
Yeah.
I think because they chose it as it was the anniversary. They identified as the anniversary of when it had been desecrated 3 years prior. So they rededicated it 3 years after it had been desecrated by the Gentiles.
And what's the timing on? I'm confused about the calendar.
So that would be 165.
Yeah, I know, but the Hanukkah tends to move around quite a bit. So
Yeah, that's because the Jewish year is based on a lunar month.
oh, okay.
So that's why the holidays drift around. So because we have a solar year in the lunar calendar, so it's
They're out of sync.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting that Cohen gave the philosophy aspect of it. Because I kind of thought that the nationalism that came out of it was because they'd won.
okay. Yeah, That's one, and that was one of the, that was his first view. They won, but then the other view, and it's emphasizing that it was the power of God, the miraculous.
And what was the third one? There were three.
The third one was kind of in between.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like, the nationalist view was we did this, by ourselves, or, because our God's good. No, that's the nationalist view. And then the other view is this was the power of God, acting in the world, kind of like maybe on a minor level, the parting of the Red Sea. And
So
back to what
in
I
their
was just going to
national,
mention, back to what Penny answered. So the Romans came in around 63 BCE. So they came in about 100 years after this. Somebody else was saying something and I interrupted.
Mary,
yeah,
you wanted to say something?
I was going to say something, but it's gone. Probably never come
What you're
back.
talking about? Yeah.
I think the focus on the miraculous part is where they focus on the 8 days with the oil and how that was the miracle.
So what do they get out of the festival? What do they get out of the celebration? Is it, are they morally more just because of it? Are they kinder and gentler? Do they have inner peace? I mean, what do they get out of it?
I can only get, I think part of it might be it's an affirmation of their identity. I mean, what do we get out of Christmas?
Right.
Or maybe a better example, what do we get out of the 4th of July?
That's probably closer. I always thought Hanukkah was for them to celebrate the centrality of their traditions.
Yeah.
Cohen was saying they would only go so far, and I presume the nationalist side of it is that they're very proud of the fact that, there's this core that they're never going to change and, fought to keep it. And, they light the candles to show that they're still doing it.
The thing that I remember from the book of Maccabees when I read it long ago as part of my education was the Maccabean Brothers being brought before the Greek officials and challenged either to go along with Greek traditions or be martyred in horrible ways.
And it's in Second Maccabees.
Second Maccabees, okay.
Yeah, I agreed it, but it's pretty gross.
Right. And each brother, they were a little crueler to each brother, and each brother died.
Right, in front of their mother.
In front of their mother, yeah.
Mhm.
Which for us Catholics was, we'd better be prepared to do the same.
Mhm.
Luckily, it never came to that.
I thought it was interesting that he brought the point that, and I'll take his word for it, that this is really some of the first instances of martyrdom for religion.
Yes, yes.
Shannon, did you hear enough to get the point?
What's that?
Did it come through for you?
Yeah, it was a little hard to understand with the, I don't know why, but it was, I couldn't really, I had to really strain to hear the lecture. But I'm going to
Well, it
go
was-
back.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But yeah, I'm going to go. I'll listen to the audio or the lecture again if I can
Yeah.
this week. And
Yeah.
it was funny because I was watching this program, and the Maccabees is now, it's a basketball team in New York, and
Wow.
yeah, I never heard this term before, and I was watching the news, and the team is, I think they're in first place, and they interviewed it's a yeshiva team, and they call themselves the Maccabees.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, I neither had I. Was it yesterday? So it just came onto the news because they're doing so well, and yeah, they were interviewing some of the players. So now I hope to get well versed in the Maccabees on all levels.
I have to get a jersey.
What's it, jersey?
Get a jersey. Get a sweatshirt. It says
Oh,
Maccabees. I wonder what their fight song is.
I'll check it out.
All sorts of stuff with that one. Anybody else? Any thoughts? So,
Mitch, I'd like to offer one thing. There's a series on PBS. It's called From Jesus to Christ.
Yeah.
And I watched it last year, and it's really, really good, really informative. And I think it starts this week. So if you're a PBS fanatic like I am, or not, it's worthwhile watching.
oh yeah, I've watched it several times. I can commend it.
Mhm.
Good.
Great. You know what night it's on, or so Google it.
I have a feeling that it has to do with whatever your local PBS station is doing this week. So it is Pledge Week, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
you will be asked for money.
Yeah. No, I love PBS. I watch it all the time.
Okay.
Nice that they're actually putting something religious on before Christmas.
That's
Yeah,
standard
it's very
procedure.
unusual.
Yeah. So,
Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna say goodnight and go look at
Okay.
PBS and see when it comes on.
All right.
From
Okay.
Christ to Jesus, was it from Jesus to Christ?
It's From Jesus to Christ.
To Christ. I'm gonna go look it up.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's 4 parts, and it's all. I mean, I've seen it several times. It's quite good.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
I shall go find out when
right.
it comes on. Good night, all.
Good night, Dale.
Right there.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, so we will reconvene next Monday. Again, we will have the Monday of the December 27th off. But next Monday we'll start with Exodus. So,
Okay.
if anybody needs anything or has any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Mitch. Good night,
Yes, thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey, have a
Have a
nice-
nice night. Bye-bye.